أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يعد حقه المجتهدون ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل البيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرض روحي وأرواحهم الفداء ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله قوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله ولرسوله إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه وأنه إليه تحشرون. Rediscovering Islam is our topic. Tonight is lecture number 2. Last night we introduced the topic and the entire commemoration, and we talked about some fundamental concepts last night that we want to build on for the remainder of the 10 days that I'm with you, inshallah. We first of all talked last night about the importance of these types of gatherings. Where there are some of us who will take these next 10 days to be a simple commemoration. We will come, we will pay our respect for Imam Hussein, his companions, and his family. We will shed some tears. We will do our best to keep the 10 days to a bare minimum for their entertainment, and then we'll move on to our life as if nothing happened. And then there are some of us who will take Karbala and the day of Ashura as an institution, as a philosophy, as a way of life, as a school of thought. To not only be commemorated, but to be instilled, applied, and followed throughout our life. And we're trying to establish that the day of Ashura wasn't about one day, it was a philosophy. It was a statement by Hussein ibn Ali that if we leave that statement in history in 61st Hijri, we've done him a great injustice. If we keep it as a historical remembrance, then we are no different than anybody else, whereas we as the Shias of Imam Hussein should be different. So the idea is for us to once again go back to the chalkboard and rediscover the deen for us. Go back and talk about those very concepts that we've been hearing about since we were kids, but now perhaps through a different lens. Now with a little bit of ma'rifat, a little bit of awareness. Understanding that we are not Muslims because our fathers and their fathers were Muslims, but because our heart, our fitrah tells us that the deen of Islam is the right deen. And there are several concepts that we'll talk about throughout these next 8 or 9 nights. Some fundamental concepts in Islam that in today's day and age are being highly confused by our youth. And one such concept we'll start off with tonight is our ubudiyat in Islam. Subservience in Islam. You see, there is some confusion in this part of the world. And unfortunately, our youth are falling into these traps. This society will preach to us that it is an absolutely free society. That you are and you can do whatever you want to do. You can think how you want to think, you can believe how you want to believe, you can even disbelieve what you believe in. And they present it such to our youth that's completely in contrast with what Islam says about azadi and freedom. And they make it sound like Islam imprisons you, limits you, restricts you, creates a series of no's for you. This is haram, this is not jaiz, you can't do this, you can't eat this, or wear this, or marry her. Everything is no. Whereas if you adopt this lifestyle, you can do whatever you want. And there are some of you, mashallah, who have enough awareness and ma'rifah to not fall into this trap. Whereas there are others where we have lost generations in this part of the world. It has to be discussed. What does it mean when Islam says to be subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To be an abd of Allah means to be what? Because the reality is that freedom is not absolute. Not anybody, not any system in this world can ever say that it is completely free of any restriction. Whether you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or you don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether you are Shia or you're not Shia. The concept of absolute freedom is a joke. Every human being is constricted and confined by some other existence. You are not free to do what you want in society. In fact, there are certain limitations this society brings about that others don't. But those aren't discussed. The Quran talks very openly about this and gives very various examples about this. You see, we believe that slavery is dead. We've been taught that. It was abolished in the 60s. And with this movie of Lincoln now coming out, they have rediscussed this in the media as well. How Lincoln was the one that abolished modern-day slavery. How because of him now there are no slaves anymore. Islam says there are slaves today as well. The difference is that back then, one person was a master, the other was a slave. In today's day and age, the same individual is the master, and the same individual is a slave as well. Back then, there was one master for each slave. Today, we are sometimes enslaved by several masters. It's not this idea where we are completely free individuals to do what we want. It's we have to understand the difference between chaos and freedom. This society will tell you guys, my youth especially, the concept of freedom is to open the cage of the bird door, let the bird go out, fly from nest to nest to nest, to do whatever he wants. Islam calls that chaos, not freedom. We have been created to be restricted by rules and regulations. We have been created to be slaves of a system. Now you can choose to be the slave of this dunya. You can be the slave of money. You can be the slave of maqam and shu'rat and fame and fortune. Or you can be an abd of Allah. Because the reality is that all of the prophets, all of the imams, if they have any shu'rat, any sort of respect in the eyes of Allah, it's because they were first an abd of Allah and then anything else. We read in our tashahhud every single day, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Because he was an abd, he became a rasul. It's not that he was given a risalat and then, oh, let me become an abd of Allah. No. The natija of his abudiyat was his risalat. And Maulana Ali and so on were no difference. But this society will teach my youth to make your nafs your God. If you want to enslave anybody, enslave yourself to your own desires. Whatever your nafs says, say, yes, sir. Whatever you say, I'll do. Haram, halal, doesn't matter. You love this woman, marry her. Whether your parents say no, your deen says no, your community says no, it doesn't matter. Whether or not she is good for you and your kids, doesn't matter. You love her, say yes. Who are these people to stop you from what you're doing? You want to live a certain life, it's your choice. No one has the right to tell you yes or no. Your nafs becomes your God. That's what the Quran, in the first instance, in Surah Jathiyah says, فَرَأَيْتَ مَنْ اتَّخَذَ إِلَٰهُهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you seen the one who makes his desires his God? So whatever that desire says, we're going to follow this. Wherever it says to be somebody who is lust, we follow it. To be angry, we follow it. To be greedy, we follow it. And then we have in Surah Al-Baqarah another type of enslavement. That says what? وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنِ اشْتَرَى نَفْسُهُ عَبْدَاهُمْ بِرِضَايَةِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ رَعُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. This ayat is revealed when? The sha'n and nuzul of this ayat is that there is also amongst the men individuals who sell their soul for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shabi Hijrat, that famous migration from Mecca to Medina, when our Holy Prophet is asking Amir al-Mu'mineen, will you sleep in my bed? Not once did Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ya Rasulullah, they're going to come and kill me. He simply asked one question. By me sleeping in this bed, will you be saved? Will Risalat be saved? Will the Deen be saved? Then I'll sleep. And this ayah talks about this idea that this man sold his soul out for the pleasure of Allah was revealed in the night of Shabi Hijrat. One ayah talks about you being enslaved by your desires. One ayah talks about you being enslaved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is an abd, the other is an abd as well. But the ma'bud is different. One's ma'bud is your nafs, another ma'bud is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This idea that nobody here is enslaved is ridiculous. Don't fall into those traps. Everyone is a slave in this world. The difference is, what is the source of your enslavement? Who is enslaving us? Because Imam Hussein would not have done what he did on the day of Ashura. Nobody would have done what he did on the day of Ashura unless his ma'bud was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not possible for him to give every ounce of his blood, every member of his family, unless he realized that I am the abd and he is a ma'bud. And everything that I have to give, I give away my ma'bud. The first lesson that we have to instill inside of us is this idea that Allah is our ma'bud. And of course that requires some difficult decisions. The problem that we have sometimes, all of us across the board, my youngsters, my respective elders, my sisters, my brothers, everybody, is that we expect from this dunya what this dunya can't give us. Always remember that. This dunya was never meant to give us sukoon and contentment. This dunya was meant for a test, an imtihan, an azmayish. One exam after one exam after one exam. There are certain youth here, their biggest task right now is trying to find a spouse. They find a spouse, they take a deep breath, and now their next hurdle is to have kids. Now when they have kids, inshallah, the next hurdle is I hope and pray these kids are sahih and salim and on the path of Allah. As those kids get older, the other problem is, will they get married? What about their education? And this goes on and on and on. We search for contentment in this world, and the dunya has never promised us contentment. This area, this dunya, this temporary abode, is simply a passing bridge. Imam Rada alayhi salatu wasalam has a very beautiful tradition. I really want you to understand this hadith, to understand the reality of this world. Because we have two choices, right? My youth especially, we have two choices. You can become an abd of this dunya and sell out your akhirat, or an abd of the akhirat and sell out this dunya. Totally up to you. Imam Raza says that this world is a bridge. And you don't build homes on bridges. Allah. Nobody in their right mind will build a home on a bridge. A bridge is used for what? Transport from one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge. That's all it's used for. At the same breath, if that bridge was to break or go out, we'd be stuck. We don't reduce this dunya to be something that's not important. It's very, very important. But to make it your home, to make it this idea of permanent abode, is a mistake that you and I make. That's why Imam Jafri Sadiq said that if you are to sacrifice the akhirat for the dunya, you lose both worlds. And if you are to sacrifice the dunya for the akhirat, you are to gain both worlds. This dunya is very, very important. Amir al-Mu'mineen has praised this dunya in that Jabal. At the same time, it also said there are two types of dunya. Al-dunya, dunya non. Our Holy Prophet says. Dunya balighan or dunya mal'una. One dunya that you can attain success in, the other dunya that is cursed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to understand the difference, I'll give you a small story, a story I like to tell. You'll get to know the way I speak in the next 8-9 days. I tell lots of stories. It helps me and it helps you, inshallah. It's a very famous story, sometimes found in our Irfan books. All of you are with me, inshallah? There's a young boy running through the woods. The story I think I've told here several years ago. He's being chased by a lion. I really want my elders especially to understand this. Of course, if you've ever been chased by a lion, which I don't know how many of you have been, but you're running for your life. He's running as fast as he can. In the distance, he sees a well. He thinks to himself, if I can get inside the well, I'll be free. He runs as fast as he can. He jumps inside the well, holds on to the rope, and begins to sway back and forth halfway down the well. The lion stops. He's perched on top of the well, looking down. The young boy thinks to himself, eventually this lion will go away. He decides to do what I would never recommend any of you to do in that situation. He looks down. He looks down and he sees a crocodile's mouth this open, waiting for him. On top is the lion, at the bottom is the crocodile. Again, he thinks eventually both of them will go away. He's still clutching onto the rope. In that halat, in that state, he hears the sound of gnawing and chewing ever so slowly. He looks above the rope, he sees a black mouse and a white mouse, ever so slowly eating away at the rope. Lion on top, crocodile at the bottom, black mouse, white mouse, chewing at the rope, and he's clutching onto the rope. If I was to ask you to give this young boy some advice, what possible advice would you give him? If I was to tell every single one of you that we are in the exact same position right now, what would you say to me? The story goes on to say the lion represents death chasing us. The crocodile is the grave open, waiting for us. The black mouse is nights, the white mouse is day. Time, chewing away at the rope of life. And we are bichare, holding onto the rope, thinking, oh my God, I hope these things go away. The story goes on to get even better. In this state, stuck to the side of the well is some fresh honey. Follow me, this is the point now. Fresh honey has a khas smell to it. He thinks to himself, can you imagine that? Thinks to himself that I've been running all day from a lion. I'm very, very hungry. Let me swing myself over and begin to eat this honey off this disgusting wall of the well. You'll think to himself, Baba, forget the honey for a while. Get yourself out of this position and worry about your food later. But no, he's devouring the honey mixed up in this dirt and mud, and he's enjoying himself. The story says that honey is that dunya mal'una. That makes us completely oblivious to what's around us. Makes us completely unaware of the reality of the situation. Sometimes we think that we're young, we're invincible. we still have 50 years of life ahead of us. So we have our fun now. At 60, 65, we buy our Hajj ticket. Labbaik, Ya Allah, Labbaik. Come back on Masoom, and then pray for our death. That's our formula. When I went to India 9 years ago, there was an awful money for Hajj. And no word of a lie, the average age of that qafla was 65 years old. Young guys were making good money, not in the qafla. I said, Papa, it's why is it not for Hajj go? Must have been 20, 25 years old. I said, look, it's not, it's why is it when you go? It's no, let me live my life first, and then at the end of my life, I'll go for Hajj. It's an actual philosophy they have in certain parts of the world. When we are in home, there are prophets that come from India and Pakistan, and I tell you, all of them are so old they can barely walk. There's one young guy, and his role is to carry the suitcase. That's all he does. He's not there for ziyarah. He's there to feed them and give them water, and take them to the bathroom and unpack their bags, and that's it. And as funny as it is, it's a real thought in our communities. This invincibility of life, I don't know who gave it to you. Especially in this world, where distractions upon distractions are in front of you. My parents in the audience, who some of you made that very difficult migration from your country to the United States of America several years ago. And you did it for several reasons. One of them, of course, is for the betterment of your children. My father made that migration in the 70s from Karachi. And oftentimes, me and my brothers talk about the fact that if Dad didn't make that migration, we'd be in Pakistan right now fighting for our life. And we thank him every single day for it. And many of you, my elders especially, did that exact same thing. It's very difficult. So sometimes our kids don't realize how hard it is to pick up the comforts of your country, come to a completely different land. No culture, no language, nothing, and start fresh. You're driving taxis, you're delivering mail, you're working any odd job, 7 days a week security, just to make sure there's food on the table. And we should recognize that as youth and generation that we live in. But I think sometimes what was lost in the shuffle is this idea that you brought your children into a non-Islamic society. And now it's your responsibility to create that society. If you don't find it in the masajids, inside of your home, create it. Your child is getting zero Islam on the outside. Your child is getting zero Islam on the inside of the house. Where will he end up in 20, 25 years? Then when our youth are off the path, we complain. We blame the ulama, we blame the masjids, the community, the Sunday school, everybody but ourselves. What did you do to ensure that your kid had taqwa, piety, deen, Islam, madhab, anything? Did you do anything at all? We drop our kid off on Sunday school for 4 hours, we think, okay, Turkey, that's it, that's good enough. Doesn't work that way. While you thought about everything else in terms of their future and their education and their safety, perhaps what was not in your mind is the fact that I am now responsible to create that Islamic mahal for my child. And in the process, we've lost generations. And those of you who are a little bit elder, you can attest to this. Our parents are now starting to get it right with their kids. The people who've been since the 60s and 70s, who have older children, a lot of them are gone. We don't see them. So it's important for us to understand the concept of subservience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To my youth, I want you to go home and read Nahjul Balagha, Subhan number 193. Subhan Muttaqeen, or Subhan Hammam, it's called. Very famous khutbah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Hammam, of course, was a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, approached Amir al-Mu'mineen, asking him to describe who the Ahl al-Taqwa are, such that I can see them, he says. Amir al-Mu'mineen reads an ayah and says, that's your answer. He wasn't satisfied. He says, no, I want more details. So for 3 pages, Amir al-Mu'mineen describes who the pious are. One day, inshallah, I'll read that sermon for you. In the beginning of this khutbah, the first thing Amir al-Mu'min describes is the way Allah's kingdom works. Allah's kingdom is such that He has made things that are forbidden and made things that are allowed. Halal and haram. But what we don't realize sometimes is that whether you and I follow those rules has no bearing and effect on His kingdom. If we now decide to completely leave the deen tomorrow, He won't be less of an Allah now. Or if every single one of us decides to be super pious tomorrow, it won't increase His kingdom. He is Allah. He was there when we weren't there. He'll be there when we're long gone. Every rule that has been brought down to us in terms of the Sharia is for our benefit or our harm. That's it. But sometimes what ends up happening is what blocks us from our ubudiyat is our own jahalat. Jahalat has two forms to it. There's jahl al-basiq and jahl al-murakkab. Jahl al-basiq is simple ignorance. You ask me, let's say, to perform open heart surgery, I have no idea how to do that. I'll say, look, I'm sorry, when it comes to open heart surgery, I'm completely jahil. Jahl al-murakkab is far more dangerous. Ignorance that is compounded with something else. I'll give you an example. One salat ala Now I've been told I have 45 minutes to read up here, but until I see the other Maulana, I'm going to keep reading. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you should call him and say, look, what's jahl al-murakkab? Amir al-Mu'mineen has a beautiful classification of those who know and those who don't know. It's something I read in Toronto a few years ago. These words of the Ahlul Bayt were said to us 1,400 years ago. And every single time you hear the words of the Ahlul Bayt, it's as if he said it this morning to us. He says that there are those, I want you guys to understand that. He says there are those who know and they know that they know. Oh. Then there are those who know and don't know that they know. Then there are those who don't know and they know that they don't know. It gets better. Then there are those who don't know and they don't know that they don't know. And the fourth, yes, is the absolute worst. Meaning those who don't know that they don't know that they don't know are those people who think they know everything. They will debate an alim until they're blue in the face about a topic. They read 2 pages of those. If I read a hadith on this member that you've never heard about, you'll come and challenge me and say, I've never heard that in the 65 years of my life, and because I haven't heard of it, you must be wrong. Jahl al-murakkab. That jahalat is mixed with your ego. Your ego doesn't allow you to say, I don't know. Let me understand this point. And there is barakat in the idea of saying, I don't know. Amir al-Mu'mineen has traditions about saying, I don't know. But there are some of us who simply can't allow us, our ego, our nafs, our ujba, our self-love will not allow us to simply say, look, okay, I don't know. Maybe this is the way it should be. And that's what stops us sometimes from being a slave of Allah. Because there are certain rulings, certain Sharia rulings that come down to us that we don't understand. And today's youth, sometimes they're so invincible, so egotistical, they sit there and say, until it makes sense to me, I'm not going to follow it. Your limited understanding, His unlimited wisdom, there's no match. Don't try to understand the unlimited by using your limited aql, please. It's enough for you to understand that Allah is your ma'bud, He's your creator. Whatever He has laid down for you is for your benefit. If you don't understand it, perform that act, the doors of understanding will open. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Al-Islam huwa al-taslim, wal-taslim huwa al-yaqeen. Yaqeen is a completely different topic altogether. But look at the tartib of his words. Amir al-Mu'mineen doesn't simply place words here and there. He's very, very careful with his words. He says Islam is submission. Submission is yaqeen, certainty. He does not say that Islam is certainty and then submission. No, and we have that mixed up. We want certainty and then we'll submit. Maulana Ali says first you submit and then the doors of yaqeen will open up for you. Sometimes we need to understand and go through that motion of ibadat to now understand the yaqeen and the wisdom behind that ibadat. And the faster my youth and my elders understand that, the faster we become abds of Allah subhanahu wa I don't need to jump on different topics here. We're talking about ubudiyat altogether. It's a massive topic that requires its own ashra. But just as an ashara to all of you to go home and do your own research, there's several factors that bring about ubudiyat, and for you to understand, I am a true slave of Allah. And one is this idea of being radi with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We read, right? Irji ala rabbika radiyatan maradiyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called Imam Hussein back to him. Called Imam Hussein back to him in such a state where he was radi with Allah and Allah was radi with him. It is an amazing, amazing station to achieve. Like I said yesterday, one thing to be a muhib, another to be a mahbub. One thing to be a lover of Allah, one thing to be the beloved of Allah. And part of that process is for us to understand that no matter what we go through, good or bad, it's the pleasure of Allah that we see. Because the way that we work, human nature, fitrat sometimes is such that as long as things are going well, things at home are good, my kids are well behaved, my job is secure, alhamdulillah, Allah Akbar, tasbih, Allahu, Allahu, Allahu. The moment things are a little bit rocky, I lost my job, my kids are off the track, my wife is bothering me, the first person we blame is Allah. Or God forbid, Allah places a tragedy in front of us, takes our spouse from us, our parents from us, our Javan son from us. We blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, you did this to me. I served your Islam for several years. I helped establish a center in North America. I don't miss one salat. And you respond to me by taking away my Javan son? Look at the himmat. Where is now your desire of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Again, it goes back to the point that I first started off with, that we expect from this dunya what it could never give us. If you want itminan of the qalb, ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innu al-qulub, the Quran says. With the remembrance of Allah in all states, in all affairs, good or bad, you remember Allah, He will place itminan inside of your qalb and hearts. It's one thing to read that in the Quran, it's one thing to actually practice it. And part of that problem is the way that we look and we face problems in this society. Islam has a very beautiful philosophy on hardships in Islam. I mentioned this in a camp a couple of years ago with my youth. And I want my elders to understand this as well. Shaykh Mutahari talks about 4 different factors when it comes to dealing with hardships in Islam. We don't believe in Islam to run from hardships. We welcome them. We understand that through these hardships, we become a human being. Gold doesn't come out of the ground with a nice chain, a nice rod, a nice ring. Sometimes it comes out black from the ground. Until it's scrubbed, until it's burned, until it's shaped and formed, then it is shown to you as this beautiful piece of gold. When the knives become dull, you have to sharpen it and scrape it for it to become sharp. Insan, human beings, are no different. Sometimes we need to go through some severe trials and tribulations to first understand our own capacity. On top of that, Shaykh Tahir says that problems and hardships are relative in Islam. Once in a I'm losing some of you. Let's try to focus here, please, inshallah. To mix things up a little bit, one more story, inshallah, and then we will move towards Messiah. There was an individual who lived in a farm. He was a farmer. He grew crops as a source of income. It hadn't rained in that farm for several months. There was a drought happening. Down the road from the farm was a family who was planning a wedding. The bride-to-be, 1 year before the wedding date, had everything planned out. She wanted an outdoor wedding, flowers and lakes and ponds and the whole nine. She had everything completely planned, like most girls do when they're 12 years old. The date was planned, the guest list was planned, the caterer was planned, decorations, everything was planned. 1 year to the date of her engagement, her wedding day, her wedding morning, she wakes up very excited. She can't wait, it's her special day. It's a day she's been planning out for 12 months. She pulls her curtain open and she sees what? Rain. Heavy rain. She thinks to herself, I planned everything to a T. I didn't take into account that it might rain on my wedding day. The wedding is outdoors. Her entire wedding day now is completely gone. She had to cancel the wedding, cancel the caterer, cancel the decorator, reschedule the wedding, everything. In the same village, the one guy that's the happiest today is the farmer down the road. 6 months he's been waiting for it to rain. His crops have been completely drought. He's had no income. Now, if you open up the same curtains and sees rain, it says, Alhamdulillah. One source of rain for one person is a problem, for another is a source of income. Difficulties and hardships in our life are relative, my brothers and my sisters. Sometimes we look at other people's lives and think, oh, he lives such an amazing life. Look at him. He's got a good job, a nice car, a strong family, his kids are great, and we envy that individual. But we don't realize there are 10 more people looking at us wishing they had our life. And we think for a moment that whatever I'm going through, I'm the only one who's going through that. The world around us is on top of the world, I'm the one who's drowning. Islam says no, not the case. There are those around you who have equally gone through that exact same issue. That's why one thing that we don't have in our community that we need to work on is this idea of an ijtimai religion. We are very individualistic members of the community. If you know that somebody is going through some issues, pick up the phone and say, look, brother, I heard about this. Are you okay? Can I offer some help? The idea of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar is completely forgotten now in our communities. Especially in this age of social media, Twitter and Facebook. These youth sometimes, they post up pictures and statuses of places they shouldn't be. And they do it very proudly. And look where I was on Friday nights. And they wait for comments to come about that picture. And comments do come by their fellow brothers in the community saying, why? I wish I was with you. You should have called me. I would have went with you. Not one person will say you shouldn't have been there on Friday nights. We become influenced by this society that tells you to each his own. Mind your own business. You have your own grades to look after. Don't worry about his grades. Islam says no, it's a wajibah. It's an obligation. Our Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam He says, I want you to imagine a boat with people on that boat. And you are one of those passengers on that boat. In the middle of the ocean, the deepest part of the ocean, you see an individual on that boat with an axe who's axing a hole in the corner of the boat. You have two choices. You can say, oh, look, he's putting a hole in the boat. All right, good luck. Hope you do very well. It's a pretty sharp axe there. Where'd you get it from? The other option is to stop and say, look, what are you doing? If this hole is any bigger, the boat will drown and we will drown with it. And the Holy Prophet says that the boat is Islam, those on the boat are Muslims, and that hole is the damage to the deen. When we see people doing damage to the deen, we have two choices. We can remain quiet and say, well, we're doing damage to the deen, it's okay. Or we can say, look, stop that. If you're affected, I'm affected by this deen as well. It's a forgotten obligation. I don't know why. There's a brother beside us who's drowning. We know he's drowning. We know how to swim. We're not going to save him. I have a tough enough time saving my own iman. I'm not worried about his. Yes, you are. It's a brotherhood. You're not an individual. You are an ummah in terms of Islam. You are a family in terms of Islam. Now, of course, there are methods to do that. Don't say, look, brother, you're going to go straight to hell if you don't do it. No. I'm not saying that. And there are ways to do it. And some of us are so defensive that someone comes to us and says, look, brother, I was watching the way you pray salat. You don't do sujood properly. It should be this way. And instead of this brother saying, thank you very much for fixing my salat, they say, oh. Look at him. Mr. Islam. Well, you write a couple of books now, you teach me how to touch that. No, thank you very much. Worry about your own namaz. And that reaction stops us from saying anything wrong. You do your obligation, let him do his obligation. But don't lose this idea of a community. It's hard enough for us to keep our deen in this part of the world by ourselves. If we can do it as a collective group, we have a little bit better chance of surviving. That's why I've always told these youth, and I'll tell you also, when it comes time for you to circle and surround yourself with individuals, choose those individuals that will lead you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have countless traditions about the effects of friends and associates that have on your deen. It's very, very crucial that we understand that. Becoming an abd of Allah, not an abd of this dunya. Once in a while saying no to your nafs, not being an abd of your desires. Understanding whatever Allah wants from us, be it us understanding it or not understanding it, is our salvation. When Imam Hussein left Medina, he took everybody with him. And one of the common discussions we have is that why were there women and children at Karbala as well? Imam Hussein didn't go for a war. Imam Hussein didn't go for a battle. Imam Hussein went for something else. On his way to Kufa, he was stopped by a horde and is redirected to another direction. Today was the 2nd of Muharram. Tonight is the 3rd of Muharram. And last night I should have read the Messiah of the entrance to Karbala, but with your permission, tonight I'll read that Messiah. When Horde was commanded by the leader of his army to not make sure, or to make sure Imam Hussein does not enter Kufa, he redirected Imam Hussein, as you know. But then he waited for instructions. Now what do I do? It got to a point where the qafila of Imam Hussein got to an area. His horse stopped where it was. As much as Imam Hussein tried to get this horse to move, his Zuljana to move, his horse wouldn't move. This was a Zuljana that would move on the ishare of Imam Hussein. This was a Zuljana that Imam Hussein would simply whisper one command, within seconds he would listen to it. But at this moment, at that place, this Zuljana was not going to move. We have two places where the Zuljana wouldn't move for Imam Hussein. One was on this day at this place. The other was Astre Ashu. After saying his khulaf al-Bidah to his women and children, he mounted his Zuljana to make his way towards the Maqtal of Karbala, but his Zuljana wouldn't move. He would say to his Zuljana that I know you're tired, Zuljana. I know that you have carried body after body with me. This one last zahmat, please, and then your zahmat is tamam. The Zuljana, the books say, lowered its head as if to point towards something. As if to say that Maulana Hussein, I would love to move. I would love to listen to your command. But there's a 4-year-old Sakina who's holding onto my legs, asking me, don't take my Baba to Maqam Karbala. The Zuljana would not move. On the 2nd of Muharram, when it got to this place, the Zuljana again wouldn't move. As the boss comes forward and says, Maulana, the Zuljana is tired. The Riwayat say 7 different horses came, but none of them moved. Imam Hussein got off the horse. Said, Abbas, look for a nearby Qabila and call them towards me. Abbas found the Bani Asad. The Bani Asad came forward, and Imam Hussein asked them, what is the name of this area that we are at? One person says that Maulana, they call this Shakul Farat. He says, is there a different name? He says, Maulana, I've heard them call this place Gharina. Is there another name? He kept asking him. Another person says that this place is known as Nahwa. And finally he asked again for the 4th time, is there another name of this place? At this moment they were completely confused. They looked to each other and they said, we have no idea. He then asked for somebody who's an older member of the Qabila to come forward. Riwayat said a very, very old man comes forward. Imam Hussein asked this old man, is there any other name that this place has that you know of? He says, Mawla, our Ajdad used to call this Karbala. Imam Hussein heard Karbala and said, Abbas, set up the tents. This is where we're going to stay. That old man pleaded with Imam Hussein that please don't stay here. Whoever has come here has become shaheed. Whoever has come here has become zakhmi. This is not the place for you to stay. This is the place of karb and bala, of grief and sorrow. But Imam Hussein said, no, this is the place where my Ali Akbar will be stuck with the mercy. This is my place where Qasim will be trampled. This is the place where my Abbas will lose his bazoo. This is the place where my 6-month-old Ali Asad, his thirst will be quenched with an arrow that's made for animals. He told the boss to set up the tents. Abbas set up the tents. At that moment, Imam Hussein began to negotiate with Bani Asad tribe. And this is where I really want us to understand the love that Imam Hussein had for you and I, even today. Look at the conditions. As you know, he bought the land from Bani Asad on 2 conditions. One condition was this, and that condition had nothing to do with Ali Akbar, with Zainab, with Abbas, with Qasim, and Muhammad. It had everything to do with you and I. He said, we will be shaheed on this land. On this condition, that if any one of my Shias were to come to me for ziyarat, if any of them were to come for me to send their salams, you are to host them for 3 days. And let them know that your Mullah Hussein sends his salams to them. On 61st Hijri, our Mullah remembered us, those of us who have been to Karbala. The second condition, he says, he went to each group in the Bani Asad tribe. He first talked to the men. He said, look, we're going to be shaheed here. We're going to be trampled here. We're going to be brutally massacred here. I want you to make sure that you don't leave our bodies unburied on the plains of Karbala. He then put up a tent and spoke to the women of the Bani Asad tribe. As if your men are not able to bury us, then all of you collectively, women, dig one massive grave and simply throw our bodies in that grave. He then went to the small children of Bani Asad. He said, if your mothers or your fathers are not able to bury us with your chotin, munni hands, simply throw khak on our bodies, please. But please don't leave our bodies here without a kafan, without any sorts of a burial. Imam Zamana sends his salams to you, Anjar Nahiya, salams to my grandfather who was left 3 days on the plains of Karbala, no kafan, no burial. يعلم الذين ظلموا أنهم مقلبين ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.